Today we are seated here with all of you discussing whether the female consumer is governed by a male agenda. Why is it important? What are some of the imperatives? Why is it because there are not enough women out there? Do we need to get more women out there? What hinders getting more women out there? And what is it that's going to help us to shake us out of this stereotypical construct that we find ourselves in? What do we need to stop doing, and what is it that we and you, all of you in this room, can start doing more of? I think these are some of the things that we're going to talk about this afternoon. I can give you a little pre-warning. This is not going to be a typical moderation. I think we are going to talk around all of these subjects in whichever order they come about in the absolutely enthralling stories that you're going to hear this afternoon. So I will kick it off, and thereafter we will be on a roller coaster ride. Is that okay? Okay, wonderful. Susan, can I go first with you, please? I said there are not enough women out there, right? Is that something important? And if it is important, according to you, to get more women out there, why is that so? Can you tell us some of the business imperatives and other things around that?
Well, I think that we need to be careful when we say there are not enough women out there, because the people we're talking to, there are a lot of women out there. So that's the first thing that we need to be aware of, is that the people that we're trying to engage in our brands and our businesses, almost half of them are female. So then that leads to the question of what's going on in companies that are actually talking to women, the advertising agencies and the marketers. What does your company look like inside? And my feeling is that if it doesn't represent a little bit of your world outside of your companies, you are at a disadvantage when it comes to success in business. So it's curious, because I started about 30 years ago in the US, and what I realized is that what I accepted as normal for a female, me, actually wasn't really normal if you think about everybody having the same chance, the same voice in the company. And you know, we were talking earlier, and I said, I don't want this conversation to be about doing what's right or what's nice or what's good for women. What I realized is my company for a good first 10 years didn't get the best of me, because I was one of the few women in the company, and instead of bringing a female voice and a diverse point of view to the company, I just tried to assimilate and be like a guy. And one of the first things I think every one of you can do starting today is to start thinking about, how do you ask the diverse people in your company, and we're talking about women today, not to show up and assimilate into your company, but to show up and bring a unique perspective and point of view to your company. And if you do that, then the people that you work with will start to change. Like if you're a marketer, the agencies that you want to work with are going to look different in their makeup. And then that makeup will actually start to turn into, I think, interesting, creative, and conversations that emotionally connect with 50% of your potential consumers, audiences, people.
Thank you, Susan. Cindy, we have 48% population of women in India, right? The statistic says that even something like cars, 65% decision-making is women, though all the product features of automobiles are actually directed towards the men. Am I right? And 80% of all decision-making is by women. So would you like to bring in your perspective on that?
Absolutely, because actually, guys, even if 48% of the population of India is female, what women represent in terms of value and money to our business is way greater. There is a huge amount of money to be made out of taking women seriously. And that's for two reasons. As Sangeeta has already identified, women buy. We are the primary purchasers of everything and the primary influencers of purchase of everything. But just as importantly, women share. Social media is simply a whole new methodology for us to do what we have been doing since the dawn of time, which is sharing the shit out of everything in a way that men don't. Because we are the gossipers. We are the chatterers. We are the talkers, the sharers, the advocates, the ambassadors. So much so that I actually say to brands that think they're targeting men, talk to women. Because women will influence men more than men will influence other men. And so absolutely, Sangeeta, in terms of buying power, in terms of money, in terms of the future of the business of every single person in this room, the future is female.
Thank you, Cindy. And you know what? It's nice to deal with some numbers here. So there's a McKinsey report which says that 50% of what's coming through the doorway, through colleges and higher educational institutions, is women. And if you as a company don't have an environment that can nurture them, you know what you're doing? You're going to be recruiting from a shrinking a recruitment panel of availability of people. And so your talent pool is shrinking, and you're not, as a company, hiring the talent that's going to be available very soon. Just around the corner. So any comments around that?
Actually, the interesting thing there that I would love to highlight is men, we live in a world where the default setting is always male. Men, you have no idea how much happier you would be living in a gender-equal world that is equally informed and influenced and designed by all of us, especially in the world of business. And the reason I bring that up in response to the point Sangeeta's made is that coming out of those colleges is a new generation of women, coming out of those colleges is a new generation of men. And both genders are looking to work in a very different world. And this is the fantastic opportunity for us as marketing and communications professionals. Because what we are very good at, what we have always done, brands, advertisers, and agencies alike, is that we have massively informed popular culture by shaping it. Advertising is one of the most powerful components of popular culture, and we have always historically defined what is aspirational. And we now have a fantastic opportunity to reinvent aspirational culture. And I'll give you one example of what I mean by that, which is that we have an opportunity to represent in our marketing the aspirational relationship role models of today. Because historically we have reinforced stereotypes. The man is the strong, confident breadwinner. The woman is the warm, caring, nurturing homemaker. But the reality of today's partnerships and relationships are that they are a partnership of equals. Because today, the economy demands that both halves of a relationship work. And that requires new forms of negotiation as to who does the childcare, who does the housework, what happens when the wife earns more than the husband, what happens when the wife has a job and the husband doesn't. And so we have an opportunity in our brand marketing and communications to reflect the reality of the world today in a way that makes it aspirational. Think about how many more men would feel better about an equality of roles within a relationship if they see that reflected in aspirational marketing and advertising that makes them feel great about that picture. Think about how many more women would feel less guilty about going out to work and more able to rely on their partner to take half the share with them. That's just one example of how we need to think as marketers about reshaping aspirational culture in a way that not only it makes audiences relate more and empathize more with the products and brands we are selling, but actually helps drive more positive benefits in society today. And for Indian society, that would be a tremendous benefit.
So, do you think one of the big things standing in the way of more women joining business, politics, and other professions is the fact that they are not viewed as an individual? A woman is usually, by society, role-bound. She's seen as a wife, mother, sister, daughter, and that's something that sort of holds them back, because I'm giving you the Indian context. While we've moved a long distance forward, we still have a long way to go. And while there are about 30% women who do work outside the home, most of them are actually role-bound, societal role-binding, which sort of limits the fact that they are seen as individuals first and role holders or social role holders second, which is by choice. And would you like to narrate some instances around?
I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this one, because I have no titles except the title that they announced when I came on this stage, very, very much. But I do think that sometimes, I will say, growing up in the South a long time ago, you know, I was meant to get married, probably to a Southern man, take his name, have children, take care of the house. All of that sounded phenomenal to me. I actually didn't think it sounded bad at all until I watched my mother go through a divorce and get left with nothing, try to raise 2 children alone, and I really saw her vulnerability in the world and thought, this isn't fair. She's a super bright woman. She deserved better. And I think that was the moment that I realized that I didn't want to be in a role that was given to me because of my gender. I wanted to be a human being. And I didn't want to be at the beck and call. I didn't want to be vulnerable to another human being. And that was a profound moment for me. I don't think I ever thought that I would end up here talking to you all about a career, but I did want to be fully realized and not put into a role first. I wanted to be Susan. Unfortunately, I did take my husband's name, Cradle, but that was a long time ago, and I love him, and it sticks, and it works. So, but I do think it is important. But I think that's on women. But I will say that what I saw starting to happen in the U.S. when it came to women being lifted up is a lot of the men did the lifting. A lot of men came out and told women they were good, they could be better, they were worthy of something. So I look at every man in this audience and say, don't forget to tell us our value, because sometimes just the way we're hardwired, we don't see it. And you know, there's an old cliche that men will accept a job they're not at all prepared for and figure out how to fake it till they make it, and women will work so much harder and make sure that they absolutely can succeed in the job before they'll dare to take it. And I owe several of my lifts up or jobs offered to me to men who said, no, you've got this. So men and women, you know, help each other see that women are ready for these new roles in their career.
Thank you so much, Susan. And we're going to do a very quick check here. How many men in the room? How many men in the room, and you need to put your hand up, would be okay if your wife did not take your name? Wow, see, India's moved on. But we have an equal number whose hand didn't go up.
I just thought it would confuse the children, and then I didn't have any children. So my one defense of why I did it didn't come through.
But thank you so much. Thank you so much, Susan, for that. And what are some of the other things that stand in the way of women joining business and joining work and going out there, joining politics, for example? And I'll give you the statistic in India. It's really low. Today we have 11% women in politics.
Because we're really smart.
Yeah, that's smart? Okay. And there's one party, one regional party, which has said we're going to give 35 to 40% of our tickets to women. So they're really trying to make change. But change sometimes needs to really be pushed. And how important is some of that? Because I can tell you that in India, the government has done quite a lot and placed the onus on companies to, one, improve their gender metrics, two, to provide for the women in the workforce. So if you have 50 women or more, you need to have a creche in the office. They've got some very generous maternity benefits, 26 weeks if you're having a child, some paternity leave as well, but I'm not clear on that. So how important are all these signs and symbols in society to really pick this issue up and fundamentally shift it?
Well, I want to go back to the roll. You said this is going to be a roller coaster ride. I want to go back to where Cindy was when we were talking about 65% of the workforce is potentially, talented workforce, people entering the workforce are going to be women. my feeling is if companies aren't ready for that talent, and it's great that the government's pushing, but you all should all be asking within your company, shouldn't take laws. I always say that laws are made for people that don't know the difference between right and wrong. That's why laws exist, not to get around them, but to just do the right thing. And sometimes the government has to step in and push us towards what's the right thing to progress. As a company, I think you should be asking yourselves, what are we going to do to make this company attractive to women when they come out with these degrees and this brilliance that they're ready to put into the workforce? And I'll tell you another thing, is it's not too early to start advertising and putting yourselves out there in a way that women are attracted to you, because I have so many females that ask me when I go on college tours, who's the company that does this marketing? Who's behind this brand work? I want to join this company because I love what they're doing outwardly. Well, if they love what you're doing outwardly, you better make sure that when they come in to see what's going on inside, that it reflects the same messages that you're putting out into the world.
Thank you, Susan. Cindy recently met someone on a flight, works for a very large consulting company, which operates worldwide. And he told me, he said, you know what? We got refused 3 contracts from the US. They told us to our face, your gender metrics are so poor. We are not going to hire you. End of story. So he said, we are working really hard to improve the gender equation in the company. And in fact, he was telling me, he said, India is already quite well progressed on that agenda compared to Germany and Japan. And he quoted these 2 countries and he said, they're really, really poor on this score. Have you had any such experiences in the US?
I think in a way, to be frank, there is no country that is performing brilliantly on this front at all. But there's a really important thing to bear in mind as every one of you in the audience thinks about what we're saying on this stage as it applies to your business. Because the appropriate response to what Sangeeta's just raised and what we've been discussing is not to go, oh, right, quick, let's get one woman on our leadership team. Let's get one woman on our board. And the reason for that is, a few years ago, Harvard Business Review published an article on a study that was done into the number of women you need to have on a board in order to deliver better business results. And what that study found was that one woman on a board, and by extrapolation on a leadership team, on a project, one woman is useless. Tokenism is useless because the alien organism has to adapt to the culture around it. She has to become like the men. 2 women is still not enough. And in fact, in this Harvard Business Review article, there's an entertaining anecdote of the time there was a board with 2 women. One of the women made a really good observation in a board meeting. At the end of the meeting, the male chairman thanked the other woman for it, because we look so much alike, obviously. The optimum number of women on a board is 3 or more. Because when you have 3 or more women, and again extrapolate to on a leadership team, on a project, those women feel supported and surrounded by their own kind. They feel able to speak up, they feel able to disagree with what the men may be saying, and boards with 3 or more women, both the male and the female directors reported better quality of discussion, better decision making, and better business results. And so the really important thing to bear in mind is don't try and hire in just 1 or 2 women. Bulk buy. Hire groups, not individuals. And there is an additional benefit to this, by the way, because to pick up on Susan's point earlier about the importance, if you are projecting a message of equality, diversity, inclusion, to make sure your business lives up to internally, something really magical happens when you make your company at every level gender equal. Sexual harassment disappears completely. Sexual harassment magically disappears when every level of a company is gender equal, because when you no longer have a male-dominated working environment, There is no longer the implicit bro endorsement that it's okay for men to behave like that. And secondly, when you have a gender equal working environment where men engage every day with women as professional equals, are exposed to women's brilliance, talent, creativity, intelligence, and insights, men cease to see women in one of only two roles, girlfriend or secretary. So if you want authenticity behind your message of diversity, make every working level of your company gender equal.
I think very, very well put, Cindy. And so bulk recruit. Don't recruit one and two. That's called ticking the box. And that has happened in a lot of cases in India because the investor community is pushing back on business and saying, you know, where are the women? Don't see any it's completely gender imbalanced company. So you need to put them. So what companies tend to do is put them into the board and hire one senior leadership role. Guess which one it is? You can guess it. HR.
Yep.
Well said. All the men in the room, yes, HR. What about putting more women out there? You put more women out there, you're going to get more women coming in through the door into your company. And as you step forward, you'll be able to hire from a talent pool which is very well balanced. And why do you need that balance? Why is it important to have that balance?
And actually, can I just chip in one point very quickly, Sangeeta? The opposite also applies. If you want to make a big statement about gender equality in your company that will attract women, make every single secretary and assistant that you hire male.
Very good. And give the women the leadership roles and put them out there. I think, I've come across, in my time, a lot of young girls doing some very difficult jobs. For example, selling cement. Selling cement bags to construction sites is not an easy job. These are girls from small towns who have the gut and the determination and the grit to actually take up these roles. And I was talking to them, and I want to tell you all this. They do have problems, okay? Because they're single women, they're young women, they're going out there to sell these cement bags. They have to deal with that trade which deals with this and buys this stuff. But they cannot tell anyone their problem. You know why? Because if your sister or your wife or anybody you know close to you came and told you that that's a problem, what will be your response? Please stay at home. Right? That's obstructive patriarchy under the guidance of protection. Please stay at home. Who's told you to do this job? We don't need the money. That's the normal response. So the other aspect which I wanted to bring out today is that when you have these 1 and 2 women in a role, please, there's an extra burden on them because they cannot even talk about what they go through. They cannot share it at home. I can give you an instance from my career. When I had somebody forgot to do my booking on a train, and I got harassed in the train by some not so good elements. And I went and complained to my boss. I said, I had this problem yesterday. He said, oh, don't worry. I'll put out a letter in the company. We don't know how to handle our women. They have to be very careful, etc., etc. So I said, sir, if you do that, I'll have to give you my letter. And he thought I was stark raving mad. He said, I'm trying to help this lady. She has a problem, and she's telling me she's going to resign. So he said, but what's wrong with that? I said, sir, I took this job not to be wrapped up in cotton wool, put in a glass case, and put in the corner, which is what is going to happen after you put out a letter to the entire company saying, we don't know how to handle women. I took up this job to do the job. So I was just sharing an incident. I did not want him to sack anybody or reprimand anybody. But you see the consequence of sharing. So your 1 and 2 women example is extremely important because women cannot take these problems anywhere else. They have to deal with it themselves. So they tend to be very lonely. So my advice to the cement company was, they had all these young girls doing this work. I said, don't put them as single people into these locations. You must have at least 2. And okay, they are helped today with a lot of social media. In our time, you did not even have a mobile phone. You had no food, you had no water. So it was a very hard time to travel. But I think that's the point I wanted to make. Okay, Susan, you want to pitch in?
No, I was just thinking I have a very progressive husband because I would be at the door crying, going, I don't want to go to that horrible job. They're terrible. It's going to be a terrible day. And he'd be like, get in the elevator, honey. You're going to be great. So it does help to be able to, everybody's going to have tough days, and to support your partner, spouse, child through it. I know it helped me a lot.
And actually, to Sangeeta's example, there are things you can absolutely do to put in place structurally to ensure that women get to do tremendous business for your company. I was in Mumbai last year speaking to the annual global leadership meeting for the Godrej Group. And another speaker there was, and I apologize, I've forgotten her name, an amazing woman who used to be the head of the Bank of India. And, you'll know who I mean. And she was telling us that one of her observations running the Bank of India was that women were disadvantaged in their ability to progress up the ranks. Because in order to progress up the ranks at the bank, you had to go and do stints at rural, you had to go and manage a bank in rural India. And, if you were a single woman, then it was very difficult going into rural areas of India, not least because you couldn't find anywhere to stay